This is Steven Diego, and you're now tuned in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. On today's episode, we are going to talk about conquering your fears. Hello, guys. Welcome to another edition of Breaking Down the Breakdown with yours truly, Steven Diego. I hope everybody has had a great week. Mine was very eventful, as always, right? Nothing boring ever happens to me, which is, in hindsight, it sounds great, but I could do without the drama, thank you very much. But you know what? I am blessed because, God had put me here and decided I get to live every day, another drama, and I learned something from it. So you know what? We're not going to speak about that. But today's episode, I do want to focus on something that I've talked about in the past a little bit, but I've never fully quite, how do I say this? I've never really explored it that much. But a lot of you know, with the OCD comes fear. A lot of fears. And I'm going to simplify this one. I'm going to generalize this one, right? I want to talk about, and it's so funny, I'm not here to really say by listening to this episode, you're going to learn to conquer your fears. No, actually not really. I'm just going to share my experiences with dealing with fear. And I know that I've spoken about it in quite a, not scientific, what is the thing? I mean, psychological way, right? Because I talk about 4 R's with my OCD when it comes to being able to conquer my fears that my OCD induces. But what about just regular fears? Just the same kind of fears everyone experiences. That is a lot harder to deal with, I would say, because there really isn't a rule book for that. With my OCD, there are certain ways in which I'm able to kind of have a dialogue that allows me to see that these are intrusive thoughts and I shouldn't be afraid of it, right? But what about actual fears? Not trauma-based, just a perfect example would be fear of flying, right? I mean, maybe a traumatic incident would be watching a movie with a plane crash, or reading on news, reading news on plane crashes, or watching news about that, and it kind of triggered you as a child, right? But sometimes fears just kind of come up for no reason, right? Sometimes it's very unexplainable as to why we have fears over certain things. And that's actually something I want to talk about, because I am afraid of flying. I am deathly afraid of flying, flying. Oh my God. Sorry. Retainer time, guys. But I kid you not, every time that I would actually have to fly out, my friends can tell you this, I have to write a message to my closest friends just in case. Just in case. I'm terrified of flying, I feel like I know the chances are very slim, but if you go down, you go down. That's my way of thinking, right? There's a lot more potential for car crashes, but I feel like car crashes, you kind of have a little bit more control, whereas you're just a passenger in the plane. You're going down, you're going to fuck down. See, isn't that terrifying? Oh my God, I really hope this episode is not inducing more fears on you guys. This is a terrible episode. I'm sorry. But what was I supposed to do? I can't avoid flying. I could have avoided flying, and I did for a very long time, right? But much like with my other fears, which I'm going to talk about later, I needed to get to places. one of the biggest benchmarks with my fight against my fear of flying would be when my grandfather died, and he lived in the Philippines. And mind you, I haven't seen him since 2004, and it was already 2017 when this happened. And every year I would make the excuse as to why I wasn't going back yet, right? In reality, it's because I was so afraid of going back because I didn't want to take the plane. And it's actually so bad to the point where I almost did not get on a flight to go back and see him. It was going to be the last time I would have ever seen him. He had already passed. And I was so torn on what to do. Because on the one hand, I felt like I wasted so many years just giving him excuses as to why I can't come home yet. And the last thing that I could have done for him would be to go home and see him off and send him off. Yet my fears, it held me in a headlock, really, making me believe that if I were to go, things were going to happen to me. And I was so, I almost was convinced to not do it. Luckily, love won. Love always wins, guys. And I said, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to go. I don't care what happens at this point. I need to see my grandfather one last time. And I'm glad that I did. Because I realized that was the first step. The very first step that I took to actually, get into the ring and win a fucking round against my fears. And from there, it was kind of like a domino effect. Understanding, and I didn't know what it was before. It's technically exposure therapy, right? But being able to put yourself in the middle of your fears to understand that it is just a fear, right? Oh, I mean, if you are afraid of a shootout, I would suggest that maybe exposure therapy would not be a thing. I think that right there, that kind of fear is a very real fear, right? That when it happens, it's fucked up. But this is where the line kind of gets drawn. Because what happens with certain people is they get convinced that a shootout can happen at any time, anywhere they go. And this is what creates, this is what creates people who actually just don't want to be outside anymore. It's so much safer at home kind of deal, right? And that's not it. That is you not living your life. If you keep on living in fear, you're going to keep on missing out. There are certain factors and certain aspects of life you cannot control. Fear, unfortunately, happens to be one of them at first. But you'll find that as you go along and as you explore what it is that you're actually terrified of, you actually have the tools to learn to manage how you feel about these events, about these things, about these people when it strikes a chord and it plays on your fears. So it's very hot in my room. I'm going to have to be drinking this periodically. But why did I decide to talk about fear today? I actually just finished watching Longlegs. Is it scary? I don't think so. But it leaves this weird, lasting impression on you. Like a terrifying dread, almost. It was probably one of the most dreadful movies I've ever watched. I mean that in a great way. It's a great movie. I liked it. But you see, having harm OCD, watching violent things or suggestive things, suggestively violent things, really triggers my OCD. And I kid you not, 4 years ago, you would not see me watching a horror movie whatsoever. No ma'am, no sir, no thank you, never gonna happen. And I've come so far. Yet at the end of this movie, and I was with my friend Erwin, and it's so funny, he asked me if I'm triggered. At the end of the movie, I felt myself feeling so uncomfortable, and my intrusive thoughts were running like 150 miles a minute. To the point where I thought I was going to have a panic attack. Not because the movie was that terrifying, no, but because it was the scenarios in my head, the fear of what if this happens to me and all that, right? And this is why I wanted to talk about it today, because I'm reminded that this is going to be an ongoing battle. It really is, right? All of the fears that we experience in life, it's not just going to go away. We're still going to be afraid of certain things. But this is what I want you guys to understand. We are not looking for the fear to go away. We are looking for something stronger within ourselves to allow us to live with our fears, but not let it interfere with our everyday lives. That is the key into taking our lives back. For far too long, there are too many people who are looking for solutions to not be afraid of things anymore, right? And you will never find that. Because there will always be that little bit of you. I mean, you can say things like, oh, well, I'm not scared of this anymore. But, think about it. There's a little bit in your head that reminds you of how it felt when you used to be afraid of it. And there's that little bit of fear that still lives inside you. But what I want y'all to focus on is what has replaced that emotion when you think of that. Because yes, you still think of the fear, but there is something else that replaces it. In my case, it used to be anger, because I was so angry that I'm mad, that I'm scared of these things. But now it's more of it's a very empowering feeling. I can't even explain it to y'all. Whenever my fears attack me now, or when I think of them, it's almost a sense of I want to get so much better than this, because I need to prove myself wrong. That's actually what takes over me whenever something strikes me as fearful. It's very interesting because I don't know if there are, I don't know there are other people that are like me, right? And for those of you who are still deathly afraid of things, like, believe me, it's all in how you think about it. Nothing like, that was such an interactive drink of water. Sorry, I'm drinking from a big ass bottle. For those of you watching YouTube right now, it's a huge bottle. But there's a lesson to be learned, not just with the harm OCD stuff, right? One of the other things that I was afraid of was traveling by myself. And this might seem like I'm just making an excuse so I can go travel to Europe on my own. But realistically speaking, if you knew me for the entire time that I've lived, I bet you 78-45 that Steven Diego going on a trip to Europe by himself for 6 days would not have been on anyone's bingo card in any year, in any month. Like, it is so unheard of. So what prompted me to actually take the plunge? Well, just one random developing anthology novel, I would say, would be, and it would be would be used to describe how things are going in my life right now, right? It's almost like I'm having like a second coming. It's like a second puberty almost, where all of a sudden all of a sudden I just decided, well, fuck. I'm gonna go live my life. Because I am tired of missing out. Now remember what I said a few episodes ago about FOMO, right? I had to ask myself, am I doing this out of FOMO? And then I realized no one's actually traveling to where I'm going. No one I know is leaving their shit behind to travel to Scotland. Yet here I am, right? Blame Doctor Who, blame, people, but here I am. I'm doing it. Because it was bigger than that. It was bigger than FOMO. I have lived my life in fear of doing things for far too long. I'm afraid to do X, Y, and Z because I'm scared I'll fail. I'm afraid to do X, Y, and Z because I'm scared that I come back and I'm in so much debt and I'll be out on the streets. So many extremes attached to my fears. I act like I don't know how to actually live. And I've had enough. I don't know if some of you ever feel this way, but sometimes you sit there super uncomfortable because you realized that you weren't able to do something because you were scared of doing it. And you're uncomfortable because you're so mad at yourself, because you want to just go and do it. Because you know you owe it to yourself to live. Yet you're sitting there still in fear. And so you just get so upset at yourself and you cry. I can describe my life in the past 20 years as being like that. Look at the music. I'm only actually starting to do my music now, right? I'm only actually starting to write an album now, to, really work on my songs, work on an EP. Because for far too long I was convinced I wasn't talented. Because I was afraid that if I were to admit that I have some form of talent, that I could actually kind of write songs, that I'm actually not the worst singer out there, that I will be proven otherwise. And I was so afraid of humiliating myself. There's nothing worse than paying, thousands of dollars to write something. Well, not write, writing is free, but to record something, right? But to publish things, to promote things, that costs so much money. To make the music video, right? And one of my biggest fears was, what if I invest in myself and ultimately it fails? Ultimately, it doesn't click. I know some of y'all can relate to this, not just in the music world, right? But with anything, really. How many of you were so afraid to start a business because you're afraid that it's not going to do well? So instead, let's say it was a cooking business. So instead of being able to share with the world your wonderful dishes, you're just forever now going to hear about it from your friends, how amazing you are at making food, and how they wish you would actually run a business. And you're going to counter that with, oh, it's not worth it. Is it really not worth it if that's the thing that you love to do the most? I always ask people that. Because there's so many people who gave up on their dreams because they had to be realistic. And I'm not shaming y'all for that. Because there are two different categories now when it comes to these things. There are people who are willing to take risks and face their fears because they know that at the end of it, they have a safety net to fall back on. And then there are those people who wishes they can face their fears and just go for it and take the plunge. But there's too many things riding, on this whole thing financially, especially, and especially if they have a family too, right, that they gotta raise. And I wanted to just be sensitive about those things for 1 second. Just for 1 second. Because I don't want you all to sit here and think like, this is so unrealistic. Not everyone could just take the plunge. It's true, not everyone can. But I'm speaking for the most part. The things that you can take the plunge for. I'm not sitting here and saying to everybody, go and leave your day jobs and start your passion projects. Definitely not. But I want you to get to a place in the future where you could possibly start it without having to leave anything behind, but also without having to live with that dark cloud over your head that keeps reminding you, what if you fail, what if you fail, what if you fail? What if you fucking fail? Are you really so afraid of failing? What's the worst that can happen if you fail? It didn't work out. You still have your entire life to get back to. It's a very tricky situation because obviously when we talk about fears, right, it depends on what we're dealing with. And that's why I wanted to generalize it a little bit, because I can't be too specific about certain things. I can be specific with my stuff, right? But when it comes to your stuff, there are so many people listening right now who are going through different things. So I hope you can pick up on what I was saying in terms of my fears and what I decided to do with them and how I was able to, not to steal or copy from Twisters, but I actually really like that trailer when Glenn Powell was like, face your fears, you ride them, right? Because it's so true. I have faced my fears for far too long, and only recently have I actually started to get into bed with them. And it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, because it taught me a lot about myself and about these fears. When you learn to live with your fears and to actually understand your fears and figure out a way to coexist with it, doors and windows and trap doors and closet doors and, all other orifices that can be opened, kind of opens up for you. It really does. Because you still have that choice to make. And you can still make that choice of whether or not to take the plunge or to understand that it's far too risky to kind of ride along your fears, right? But to understand that and to have a better understanding of yourself is the best possible outcome that can come from you actually facing your fears. It's actually really funny because some of y'all were probably expecting me to, drop like super, super awesome words of wisdom on you in terms of how to deal with your fears. And I want you to be disappointed that you're hearing the same things that you've heard of before. I want you to be disappointed because I want you to now realize that if you actually had just opened your minds up in the past, when people told you certain things about your fears or even yourself, if you had just believed in yourself in the first place, maybe it wouldn't have felt like wasted time. But see, that's the one layer I want to add to this. If you have lived in fear for so long and you're starting to finally get out there and starting to finally face it, I don't want you to think those years that have gone by as a waste of time. It felt like it, yes. You got frustrated, yes. You can sit here, look back and say, fuck it, I should have done this a long time ago, yes. But the one thing still remains. You weren't ready. As frustrating as things are at the moment, now you are. Everything happens for a reason. Timing is everything. And especially when dealing with your fears. You grow up to be a lot wiser. You really do. You become better equipped emotionally. Sorry, that is because I just had to kind of remind myself that, you know, some of us actually kind of get worse as we get older, and that's why we need therapy, right? But some of us actually start therapy, and it allows us to see the world from a different mindset. That allows us to thrive in spite of all our fears. So if you're sitting here right now and listening, ask yourself, what is the one thing I am so afraid of? Monsters don't count. Listen, right? Remember what I said about being able to kind of, you know, how should I say it? Like, gauge or like determine what kind of fear you gotta face, right? The one motherfucking thing, and you know, Filipinos, if you're listening to this right now, you're gonna laugh at me, right? I said this before in a podcast, a podcast episode before, but I'm not fucking with aswangs. Hell no. That is like a Filipino folklore monster. Nah, I don't care. I'm not gonna go to a province where they live and say, I am facing my fears. No, this is like the, you know, like the shootout fear thing. No, I'm not dumb. Okay? But I've conditioned myself to believe that not everyone's a monster and that I shouldn't be afraid of everyone I talk to. See? Differences, right? There's levels to it. But all in all, I wanted to bring this up because this is something that's been on my mind lately. I found myself doing more and more things that are outside of my comfort zone. And I realized it's because I finally had enough. I'm almost 40, right? I'm 36. And I need to start living. I need to start thriving. I don't want to just breathe in this world. I don't want to just follow others' footsteps. Which, by the way, nothing wrong with being a follower. But the point of being a follower, for me at least, is so that you can learn to lead your own way later on. And I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm ready to conquer my fears. Bit by bit, one by one. And I hope, as silly as this episode was, I hope you all felt the same way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Please be kind to others. You never know what they're going through. You never know what they're afraid of. Maybe they're afraid of you, right? Maybe they're afraid of people who wear blue. I don't know. Maybe they're afraid of people who are like this, like that. It is absolutely valid. It does happen to people. And I always say this. Kindness always wins. Love always wins. And you can have a hand in turning someone's fears into just background noise in their heads. If you are someone who wears blue and you meet someone who is afraid of the color blue, yet you now are going to attach the color blue to something with kindness and love, that's going to confuse the fuck out of their brains. And it's what's going to help these people think twice about their fears, if it's irrational or not. This has been Breaking Down the Breakdown. I will see you all next week. It will be my last episode for the season. 19 episodes this season. Craziness. I only usually do 12, but maybe I'll take an extra long break. Who knows? Maybe not. I have so many things to talk about, but thank you. I love you all. Thanks for listening. If you want to be a guest on the show, don't be afraid to DM me. email me breaking down the breakdown at outlook.com, or follow us on Instagram, breaking down the breakdown pod. This has been Steven Diego. Thank you again. I love you all so much. Have a great week. Good night, guys, or good morning. Bye.